Morning. Today we're going to do the fourth in the series of short videos about how to tune, specifically aimed at well, any musician really, but old-time American, because I'm covering fiddle, banjo and guitar or folk. Now I've got a student with me, and Barbara, this is her fiddle, and her son used to play, and it's now over 20 years ago. So we're going to change the strings. I've got a set of strings that are no more than 6 months old that I'd had on an instrument, so we'll put those on. As we do that, we'll just go through a few checks. The fiddle is a lot more of a floating instrument, so you've got a floating bridge, a tailpiece and things, so you have to take a little bit more care, and you've got friction pegs usually and fine tuners. So one of my fiddles has got geared pegs, but we'll use this. Okay, so it's out to tune anyway, but that doesn't matter. We're going to change one string at a time, so that's very important. I must reiterate that. If you take all of the strings off of a violin, not only will the bridge fall over, so you'll have to put the bridge back on. You do it, even in any case, we'll have to make sure the bridge is in the right place, but you have a danger of knocking the sound post over. Now, sound post you probably can't see. No, probably not. It's a post that transfers the vibrations from under one of the feet of the bridge, and it carries it along the soundboard. So it transfers the vibration from string to bridge to soundboard, and it's essential. Sorry, I'm going to close the door. Sorry, something outside making a noise. So take off one string at a time so that we keep the bridge and the sound post in place. The sound post shouldn't really be wedged in there, so it should have enough pressure when the strings are pressing on the bridge and the belly to keep it upright. And it shouldn't really fall over, but it could be easily knocked over. So let's take the E string off. And so you just unwind the friction peg. And it's a good idea to put something underneath the tailpiece, because if you've got fine tuners, when you take that off, the fine tuner can drop down and score the belly of the instrument underneath. So I'll put that cloth underneath for now. So we're going to take this string off, which is this is the easy bit. Well, it's not that difficult, but it just takes a bit of practice, particularly with fiddle. Let's get rid of that old string. And we're going to put first a new E string on. Now, as you do this, there's a few things that we need to look at. Now, very often, pegs on the violin will slip, and you should be able to see two glazed patches where the peg has touched the inside of the peg box, and that's glazed. We have done this before, but I'm going to apply some chalk this time. So I've got a piece of fairly fine sandpaper there. I'm going to take the glazed bit off. You don't want to take too much wood off, just take the glazed area. If you're unsure about this, you can always go to a luthier, who will do a very good job of refitting new pegs, but they will charge, obviously, for their time and expensive materials. But you can take the glaze off, and then what I'm going to do, I'm talking through this one. With the others I'll just go through it without rabbiting on. I've got a piece of chalk here, soft chalk. I'm just going to apply this on the peg. Now if it's the other way round and the peg's too stiff, there is a product called peg paste made by Hills, which you can get. And some people traditionally, I think they used to use dried powdered soap as well. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully that'll make it grip a bit more. See that chalk on there? Hope it's not too much. And we'll pop the peg halfway back in, not all the way in, just so we can expose. Oops, bit of a faff there. We want to be able to thread the string through that tiny little hole there without the other strings interfering. So let's take our E string Okay, because this string's used, the end of it I just need to straighten out slightly. On a new string it'll be dead straight. Then, as I say, they're not old strings, they're just ones that I'd bought and they didn't suit one of my instruments, and I kept them as spares. But so I'm going to thread that through the tiny little hole that I pointed out. Can be a little bit fiddly, forgive the pun. Okay, now that you want enough length of the string to go through the hole so it doesn't pull out when you turn it. Now I'm going to push and turn, not too tightly, just get some of that string wrapped round the peg. Friction pegs, they tune up very quickly. So there's a few layers, and you can see the winding. I'm going to just pull it to where the winding hits about the nut, the winding on this end of the string. You can see there's quite a lot of length this end. Now the ball end fits in a fine tuner, you probably can't see it, but there's a groove, and you want to fit the string into there so the ball rests behind it. You have something called a loop end string as well for a different type of fine tuner. It's where there's no groove and there's just a little hook. That's for a loop end, but most of ball end. So you slot the ball end in. Sometimes you'll find that the string is too thick for the groove, in which case you can get a piece, something like a metal rule or a knife, and very carefully pry open the groove. The metal is quite pliable. So I'm going to tune this string. Now, when you're tuning the string, this is quite important. These pegs are conical and they go into a tapered hole. They're friction pegs, so you need to, it's no good just turning it. Hear that? So you need to apply some pressure to it, but you want to also have a finger or a hand here. Now you don't want the finger covering the hole where the peg comes through. You just want a bit of pressure there, and you ease it in. It's like screwing something into a screw into a wall or something. So we're not going to tune it right up now. So and we do the rest of the strings. So I'm going to repeat the procedure with the rest of the strings and be back shortly. Right, okay, so I've put all the new strings on and I've done the same to every peg. I didn't want to do that on camera, it would take ages. Now the next thing we need to look at is the bridge. Now you can see that this bridge is leaning ever so slightly forward. On a violin bridge, this side of it, the back side, should be flat basically, and the front side is carved by the person who fits it, the luthier, into a slight curve. So we use, there's more or less, should be a right angle between, well, roughly, because this is curved as well, but between here and here. And the feet need to fit exactly on the curve, and so it's quite a hard job fitting a violin bridge, and I'm not going into that. That's for the luthier. People can learn themselves to do it, but you need to read up on it or take a course or something as an amateur. But as you tighten the strings, it will pull the bridge forward. So we need to make sure the bridge isn't too far forward and it's in the right place. So to do that, the strings they're not totally up to tune yet. So I'm going to take the kind of rest the fiddle down, take the bridge firmly so I don't knock it over with both fingers, and just ease it back. Be very careful doing this, but you can do it. If you do knock the bridge over, whatever you do, keep the fiddle horizontal so the sound post doesn't fall over. Slacken off the strings and try again. So let's move it back a little more. Okay, it's a bit better. And as you tune up, you might have to do this several times. Just make sure that the bridge is not leaning forward, or back for that matter. Now, the position of the bridge, basically, if there's the two nicks on the F hole, I believe they're called the B strings. Imagine that there's an invisible line in between those, and the back of the foot of the bridge matches up with those lines. So this is a little bit far back. There's also a measurement, which is 328 millimeters approximately, but violins vary. For example, I know mine, it's slightly longer than that to fit the B strings. So I'm just going to ease it forward slightly. It also depends on where the sound post is. You want the optimal sound. So you just want to ease it so that it's, I'll probably just loosen off the strings slightly to do this. Because it's been there for a long time. It's kind of melded with the varnish, that hopefully not too badly. This violin hasn't really been touched for more than 20 years, so you're going to expect it to need a little bit of TLC. Nothing wrong with the instrument as such. It's a, there we go. We've got that moving. It'd been on there in the same position for a long time. It didn't want to move, so I'm going to shift that forward ever so slightly. It's the correct position. That's it, and we're going to check that it's still not leaning forward or anything, and we're going to tune up. So you can see I'm putting a pressure on the other side of the scroll with the hand. I'm not doing this, putting pressure on the neck and turning like you're screwing something into a wall. You might, if you really struggle with this, take the string off again. Just get used to feeling the feel of the peg. After a while it becomes second nature. I tend to rest the fiddle against my body or on my lap like that. When you get it approximately in tune, just check that the bridge isn't leaning forward again and adjust as necessary. So move it back again. When it's approximately in tune, use a fine tuner, but make sure you're not screwing it all the way down, because again you can mark the belly with these things. So that's in tune. I did have a request for someone to say how do I tune up to A without the pegs going. So same principle, you're just going higher. Just that you want well-fitting pegs and pressure on it. And that's tuned to A. When you tune those two strings up, the others will go slightly flat, so you must recheck it again. So that's A. So hope that wasn't too long-winded. It's a little bit more difficult changing strings and tuning on the violin than it is on guitar or banjo.